Wind. Water.
Let's annihilate these turkeys! Okay, aerial box.
You thought that first list was disturbing? Think again, because if part 1 pulled back the curtain, part 2 rips it wide open. From seizures that hospitalize hundreds of kids, to mob money funding Saturday mornings, to banned episodes so shocking they vanished after a single broadcast, these are 10 more childhood cartoons with real backstories far more disturbing than the shows themselves. And a quick shout out. Thank you so much to everyone who supports these deep dives with super thanks. It really helps me keep digging into the stories networks never wanted us to know. And if you want to relive these classics, I've dropped the DVD links in the description and pinned the comment. Now, let's start with a death so shocking it scarred a generation of kids. Transformers was about good versus evil, Autobots versus Decepticons. But the real villain wasn't Megatron. It was Hasbro's marketing department. In 1986, Transformers the movie blindsided kids everywhere when Optimus Prime, the heart of the series, was killed off on screen. And it wasn't for dramatic storytelling or creative vision. It was cold, calculated business. Hasbro executives wanted to wipe the slate clean so they could roll out a brand new toy line. To them, Optimus wasn't a hero. He was just old inventory taking up shelf space. The impact was devastating. Children left theaters sobbing uncontrollably. Parents jammed Hasbro's hotlines and demanded to know why the kid's hero had been taken away. Some children were so distraught they locked themselves in their rooms for days, refusing to eat or speak. It got so bad that even Hasbro executives later admitted they had grossly underestimated how deeply attached kids were to these characters. They thought they were just plastic toys, not family. The backlash grew so loud and relentless that Hasbro had no choice but to resurrect Optimus Prime for the very next season. But for millions of kids, the damage was already done. A generation was scarred by the careless decision to kill off a beloved hero for the sake of sales numbers. It became one of the most infamous examples of corporate greed shaping and shattering childhood memories. And while the death of Optimus Prime shocked kids in the theater, the next story is even more disturbing. Because instead of heartbreak, it caused sheer panic in real life. An episode that sent ambulances rushing through the streets and left over 600 children in hospitals after a single night of television.
Farewell.
Oh, it's snowing!
Super potion, please. Oh no,
December 16th, 1997, Japan. Millions of children tuned in for a new Pokémon episode titled Denosenshi Porygon. It started like any other night of adventure with Ash and Pikachu, bright colors, cheerful battles, the comfort of routine. But halfway through, the screen suddenly erupted into violent red and blue strobe effects. Within minutes, living rooms across the country turned into scenes of panic. Children began collapsing, convulsing, or staring blankly as their parents rushed to their side. Phone lines to emergency services lit up as desperate families begged for help. Ambulances flooded Tokyo's streets, sirens echoing into the night as hospitals scrambled to handle the influx. By the end, more than 600 children were hospitalized with seizure symptoms, and some were kept overnight for observation. The scale of the incident was so massive that it made international headlines the very next day. Newspapers and TV anchors worldwide asked how a simple cartoon could nearly trigger a mass medical emergency. Pokémon, once the darling of Japanese pop culture, suddenly became a national scandal. The fallout was swift and devastating. Pokémon was immediately pulled off the air for months. The episode was banned forever and has never been rebroadcast anywhere in the world. And perhaps the cruelest twist? Porygon, the Pokemon at the center of the episode, was unfairly blamed and effectively blacklisted from the franchise, despite Pikachu being the one on screen during the strobe sequence. What was supposed to be a lighthearted night of children's television had turned into one of the largest medical emergencies in broadcast history. The event cast a shadow over Pokemon that has never fully gone away, a chilling reminder of how entertainment meant to delight can sometimes harm in ways nobody could predict. And if you thought hospitals filling with children was disturbing, imagine tuning into your favorite cartoon and watching the characters you love stumble around drunk, crash a car, and die right in front of you.
Now this afternoony, summertime is here.
A 3-month vacation circuits across the...
In one of the most infamous missteps in children's television, Tiny Toon Adventures crossed a line no one would expect. In the short episode One Beer, Buster Bunny, Lucky Duck, and Hampton Pig discover a single can of alcohol. Instead of playing it off with a harmless joke, the characters chug it down and immediately spiral into a drunken frenzy. What followed shocked everyone. The beloved mascots stumbled through scenes, slurring their speech, staggering down hallways, and making fools of themselves. But then, it went even darker. They stole a police car, swerved dangerously through the city, and in the final moments, careened off a cliff to their deaths. Yes, death on a kids' show. Viewers couldn't believe what they were seeing. Parents were horrified that Warner Brothers, the studio synonymous with Looney Tunes and lighthearted mischief, had signed off on an episode where its childlike heroes literally drank themselves into oblivion. The backlash was instant. The short aired once and was yanked from rotation forever, effectively buried by the network. To this day, One Beer remains one of the most disturbing misfires in children's animation history. It's often spoken about in hushed tones as if the episode itself was a ghost Warner Brothers would rather pretend never existed. But the truth is undeniable. Even the most beloved cartoon icons weren't safe from poor judgment in the writer's room. And if 3 cartoon characters drinking themselves to death sounds bizarre, the next story pushes even further. Because it's about a cartoon that dared to tackle something no children's show had ever touched before: AIDS.
Don't matter. Only I matter.
Captain Planet and the Planeteers was best known for tackling villains like pollution, greed, and environmental destruction. But in 1992, the show shocked audiences by confronting a very different kind of enemy: fear and prejudice. The episode, titled A Formula for Hate, followed a young boy who was revealed to be HIV positive. Instead of an evil factory or toxic sludge monster, the danger was society itself: bullying, ignorance, and the stigma surrounding AIDS. For countless kids watching, this was the very first time they had even heard of HIV, let alone seen it addressed in a cartoon. It was a groundbreaking moment in television history. No other children's series had dared to touch a topic so politically charged, so personal, and so misunderstood. Yet, instead of being celebrated for its courage, the episode became a lightning rod for controversy. Conservative groups condemned it as inappropriate for young audiences. Sponsors grew nervous. Many local stations outright refused to air it. The result was tragic. What could have been a milestone in teaching compassion and understanding to an entire generation was buried under backlash. The show that proudly taught kids to recycle and protect the planet wasn't allowed to teach them the equally vital lesson of protecting each other. The irony couldn't have been more cruel. A series built on caring for the earth was silenced when it tried to teach kids to care for human beings. And speaking of censorship, the next story is about a cartoon so dark, so ahead of its time, that Disney themselves stepped in and tried to destroy it.
It's you at last. I am Thalog.
Whoa.
What kind of abomination are you?
Gargoyles was unlike anything else on Disney Afternoon. While most shows offered lighthearted comedy and simple adventures, Gargoyles dared to be different, dark, gothic, and unapologetically complex. Its serialized storytelling drew from Shakespearean tragedy, medieval myth, and moral dilemmas that treated kids like they were smart enough to handle weighty themes. Children loved the action, adults respected the depth, but Disney executives, they hated it. To the suits upstairs, Gargoyles was too scary and too smart for a children's block. Instead of supporting its boldness, Disney stepped in and began dismantling the very things that made the series great. They forced it into a rebranded spin-off called The Goliath Chronicles, stripped out the arcs carefully laid by the original writers, and demanded a lighter, safer, and blander product. The result was devastating. The show's momentum collapsed almost overnight. What could have been Disney's answer to Batman the Animated Series, a cultural touchstone for dark, intelligent superhero storytelling, was gutted by the same company that created it. For fans, it felt like betrayal. For the creators who had poured their souls into the series, it was pure heartbreak. What remains today is a bittersweet legacy. Gargoyles is still revered as one of the most ambitious cartoons of the 90s, but also remembered as one of Disney's greatest self-sabotages. And that brings us to Batman the Animated Series, praised as one of the greatest cartoons of all time. But behind its sleek animation and moody atmosphere was a work environment that was anything but heroic.
I'll have to make him come to us.
Batman the Animated Series looked flawless on screen, sleek, cinematic, and years ahead of its time. But behind that polish was a work environment that pushed its creators to the breaking point. Animators worked brutal overnight shifts, often crashing on couches or sleeping bags under their desks just to meet the impossible deadlines. Some described spending days inside the studio without ever going home. Deadlines were so unforgiving that episodes were sometimes shipped overseas half-finished, leaving outside studios scrambling to patch together mistakes frame by frame before broadcast. The result was a masterpiece, but one built on exhaustion. The darkness and grit that defined Gotham City didn't just come from artistic choices. It reflected the drained, burnt-out team who poured every ounce of themselves into it. What fans remembered as the defining superhero cartoon of the 90s was for its staff one of the most punishing projects of their careers. Even decades later, many of the people who worked on it look back with both pride and pain, a show that redefined animation, but at almost an unbearable cost. And if exhaustion and burnout sound bad, the next story shows how production chaos went even further. This time, it nearly destroyed an entire studio. Chaos so intense that animators still call it one of the worst productions of the 90s.
All aboard, Horsey!
County Hall! Cliff ahead!
Hang on, Doctor!
Reviving Johnny Quest should have been a slam dunk. The original had a loyal fan base, and the 90s were ripe for a darker, more adventurous reboot. But instead of glory, what followed was pure production hell. Scripts were endlessly rewritten as executives couldn't decide what direction the show should take. Entire creative teams were hired, fired, and sometimes even rehired again, leaving animators in constant limbo about whether their work would survive the week. The budget ballooned out of control as deadlines slipped further and further. What should have been a prestige revival slowly transformed into a financial black hole. Inside Hanna-Barbera, the atmosphere turned toxic. One animator later described it bluntly: the most toxic workplace I've ever survived. Stress, frustration, and wasted effort piled up until the studio was bleeding money and morale. By the time The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest finally limped onto television after years of chaos, the damage was irreversible. The revival wasn't a triumph. It was a cautionary tale about how not to run a cartoon. And while Johnny Quest's disaster stayed largely behind the scenes, the next show's darkness was broadcast in plain sight. Its most shocking twist? Censorship so severe it erased entire love stories and rewrote characters' identities. When Sailor Moon finally crossed the ocean to America, it wasn't the same show Japan knew and loved. Entire episodes vanished before they could air. Storylines were hacked apart and rewritten to fit a narrower version of acceptable kids' TV. And most infamously, the romantic relationship between Sailor Uranus and Sailor Neptune was erased entirely. In the US dub, they weren't lovers. They were recast as cousins. This wasn't just harmless editing, it was censorship that gutted the heart of the story. What had been a groundbreaking LGBTQ+ representation in the original was scrubbed away, hidden from the very kids who might have been seeing themselves reflected in those characters for the first time. Millions of American children grew up with a version of Sailor Moon that was deliberately stripped of its diversity and depth, all in the name of protecting them. The result is a disturbing reminder that childhood isn't only shaped by the shows we watch, it's shaped just as much by what we're never allowed to see. And those missing pieces changed the cultural impact of Sailor Moon for an entire generation. But Sailor Moon isn't the only cartoon with skeletons in its closet. Believe it or not, America's very first primetime cartoon family once used their platform to push something shocking: cigarettes.
Nice flying weather, eh, neighbor? Ready? The hard way! No hands!
Long before they were showcasing Fruity Pebbles cereal or starring in reruns for generations, Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble were pushing something much darker: cigarettes. Yes, cigarettes. In the 1960s, The Flintstones was a primetime show for families across America. But during commercial breaks, Hanna-Barbera's Stone Age dads appeared in live ads smoking Winston cigarettes, casually encouraging families to light up. Fred and Barney didn't just smoke on screen, they pitched tobacco with a smile, normalizing the habit for children who tuned in with their parents. These ads ran during family viewing hours, which meant kids watching their favorite cartoon were also watching their heroes sell a product now proven to kill millions. It's almost unthinkable today, but at the time, it was treated as just another censorship deal. The most famous cartoon family in America wasn't just entertainment, they were a marketing tool for big tobacco. And if that feels unsettling, wait until you hear what fueled another Hanna-Barbera hit, a show about a goofy, mystery-solving dog that may have been connected to something straight out of organized crime.
Where are you? We need some help from you now. Come on, Scooby-Doo, I see you.
Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Has always seemed like one of the safest, most wholesome cartoons imaginable. A talking Great Dane, a goofy gang of teenagers, colorful villains in rubber masks. It doesn't get more family-friendly than that. But behind the curtain of Hanna-Barbera, whispers began circulating in the 1970s and 80s that the company's funding may not have been quite as innocent as the shows they produced. The rumors suggested that Hanna-Barbera, despite its massive cultural influence, wasn't immune to the darker financial dealings of the entertainment industry. Insiders quietly claimed that some of the money keeping Scooby-Doo and other Saturday morning staples alive was linked to organized crime financing. While details were never fully proven, the mere idea that America's most lovable cartoon dog might have been indirectly propped up by mob-linked money cast a chilling shadow over the franchise's legacy. For parents and kids watching at home, Scooby was a symbol of goofy fun and lighthearted mystery solving. But for those in the industry, there was an unspoken irony. While Scooby and the gang were unmasking villains every week, some of the real villains may have been hidden in the show's very funding. The suggestion that mafia money helped keep Saturday mornings alive adds a bizarre, unsettling footnote to one of the most iconic cartoons of all time. Whether the rumors were exaggerated or not, the thought remains haunting. Could America's most family-friendly mystery solvers owe their longevity, at least in part, to the same kind of shady forces they spent every episode trying to expose? It's a possibility that turns Scooby's goofy laugh and Shaggy's cowardly quips into something far darker when you realize the show's very survival may have rested on secrets more disturbing than anything the gang ever solved on screen. From seizures that sent hundreds of kids to the hospital, to censorship that erased entire love stories, to corporate greed and sabotage that crushed shows before they could reach their potential, it's clear that the bright, colorful cartoons of our childhoods were often hiding shadows far darker than anything we ever saw on screen. These weren't just harmless Saturday morning distractions. They were products of an industry filled with backroom deals, impossible deadlines, moral panics, and sometimes even rumors of criminal ties. Looking back now, it's both fascinating and disturbing to realize how much was going on behind the shows we thought were pure, innocent, and fun. Every smile, every theme song, every character we loved came with stories that most fans never knew. Stories that reveal just how fragile and messy the world of children's animation really was. So now I want to know, which revelation shocked you the most? Was it the mass Pokémon seizures, the banned Tiny Toons episode, or maybe the whispers about Scooby-Doo's mob connections? And more importantly, what cartoon secrets should we dig into for part 3? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Smash that like button if you want more deep dives like this, and don't forget to subscribe for future uploads. And if you want to help me keep exposing the disturbing truths behind Saturday morning TV, tap that super thanks. It really helps support the channel and makes it possible to keep bringing you stories networks never wanted you to hear. See you next time.